will now proceed to the next segment of this event, and it is my privilege to invite Professor Madhura Swaminathan, Professor and Head Economic Analysis Unit, Indian Statistical Institute, Bengaluru, an internationally acclaimed scholar whose work has significantly contributed in the fields of food security, agricultural development, rural livelihoods, and public policy. I welcome Madam to deliver the keynote address.
Good morning. I'm very grateful to Vice Chancellor Professor Aldous Janaya for inviting me and to be here at the 66th Foundation Day, and with the honorable dignitaries, Sri Nageshwara Rao, Honorable Minister, Sri Kodanda Reddy, Chairman of Telangana Agriculture Farmers Welfare Commission, Sri Prakash Gaud, and of course Justice Sudarshan Reddy, who has actually laid the ground for my talk very well, and all the other dignitaries on the dais, colleagues and students. I can start with what I was going to end because it follows what Justice Reddy said, is that the vision for food security, the vision for well-being. And what I'm going to do today, what was happening and how we see these contributions today, or what is the role of science and policy in the context of food security. I am going to show you quite a few photographs which are taken from the National Center for Biological Sciences, NCBS, which you know is part of TIFR, one of our leading science institutes located in Bangalore. And in about 2021, we donated the papers of my father, M.S. Swaminathan, to the NCBS archive. At that time, it was the 9th scientists. They were focusing on agricultural and biological scientists. Now they have about 99 scientist collections, including physicists and chemists and so on. Because the other source of information, which you can all, so NCBS archive is online, the digital collections, you can search that. And the other source of information for some of the quotations I'm using today is a special issue of the Review of Agrarian Studies. I am one of the founding editors or editorial team members, and we had a special tribute issue in 2023, and many of the articles are drawn from there. This journal is also online, so please check it out, and students, please contribute articles because it's also National Academy of Agricultural Sciences has listed it as well. So let me start with a quote from Kenneth Quinn. If you take the 10,000 year long history of human agriculture, the 6 decades from 1963, he says, will be seen as the single greatest period of food production and hunger reduction in all human history. And he has worked closely with Norman Borlaug, with M.S. Swaminathan, and with Yuan Longping, who we all know is the father of hybrid rice in China. And all these three scientists actually lived into their 90s. What happened? Why are we calling it a green revolution? Do we still need to use the term? And of course, today, looking back in hindsight, there are new problems, there are issues, there are concerns. Dramatic change. So I just want to spend a few moments on that. So Dr. Himanshu Pathak, now DG of ICRISAT, but earlier Director General of ICAR, wrote that India has made the fascinating journey from being a country of starvation to a food surplus country. When he wrote this in 2023, we were at 330 million tons. Today, 357 million tons. So again, something that all of you know, but it's worth jogging our memories. You see, I put 1966, 67. I was starting with 63, but then Mrs. Gandhi came to power later, so I added that row. You can see that from about 9 tons production, by 1969, we are at 20. So production is doubling in this 5 to 6 year period as it had doubled in the previous 10,000 years. So that is what the Kenneth Long Quinn quote was about, that this is really a very, very dramatic change, doubling of production in 4 to 5 years. If you take 66, 67, 11 million tons, by 70, 71, we are in 23.8 or 4 million tons. So this is wheat yield and wheat production. Again, all of you are familiar with these numbers, but you can see, if you just take that period and visually, you can see how, from 63 to 70, where we have gone. And this kind of growth is remarkable, and that is why it was given the term green sort of revolution, that it was not an ordinary growth. All of you know econometrics, and you look at linear growth and other growth patterns. So now what I want to show is a few photographs. So this is Mrs. Gandhi releasing the wheat revolution stamp, 20 paise, in 1968. And again, all of you students know that this is the library of the Indian Agricultural Research Institute, which is in the background. This is the book of stamps again. These photographs are from the archive. So the first point I want to make is that what we see here is starting from Nehru and Lal Bahadur Shastri, but through Mrs. Gandhi's period, which is when the Green Revolution fruition happened, we see support to science and scientists. So this is the first lesson that I want young people here to think about, the importance of science in today's age, when we are asked to believe in somewhat predictions of astrologers and babas and others. It's very, very important that all of you see yourself as scientists. There's a scientific method, evidence-based. There may be errors, then you correct yourself and science moves ahead. So I've given a quote here from Bruce Alberts. Some of you might have looked at his biochemistry textbook. Bruce Alberts was the president of the US National Academy of Sciences for 10 years. He was the editor of Science. And he, about 30 years ago, after meeting MS Swaminathan in the course of some, it's a long story, CGIR evaluation, was actually introduced to Nehru's idea of scientific temper. And in every lecture at the US National Academy of Sciences, he would quote India and he would quote Nehru and the scientific temper. So coming from that tradition, it's so sad to see how science is being trashed today. So he said that he learnt by his visits to India, particularly to Chennai and Tamil Nadu and the Swaminathan Research Foundation, how we can harness science to improve the lives of the rural poor. So I think this support to science and scientists, and I'm starting here with a photograph of Lal Bahadur Shastri, since of this, he came for the founding of this institute. The prime ministers were not going to inaugurate statues, they were going to the farmers' fields. I think this is what we need to see. Let's look at the next. And then I come to Mrs. Gandhi here at the convocation of IARI. So giving support to scientists, trusting them, coming for scientific events. This is very important. The Prime Minister of India used to always inaugurate the Indian National Science Congress till it stopped a few years ago. Now this is the same, I'm showing you a close-up of this bouquet that Mrs. Gandhi was holding in her hand at the convocation. So that is what the label of so it was not a flower bouquet, Vice Chancellor, it was a bouquet of the latest varieties that had been developed at IARI. Second very important thing, what does support to science mean? It means financial support, it means funding support. And I want to give you some numbers here because again we see declining support to agricultural research in India. If you look at 1980, the share of total public expenditure spent on agriculture, India was 4 times the ratio being spent in China. We always try to compare ourselves with China. I think we should stop because we are no longer in that race. So in 1980, in the 1980s, if you had asked any agricultural scientist globally, the Indian NAS was probably better than the Chinese NAS. Today we cannot even compare ourselves. In 2014, in absolute terms, the expenditure per year that China had on agriculture was $200 billion, ours was $21 billion, 10 times. For 20 years, they spent 10 times more than us annually. How can we compete with that in terms of scientific advance? So I think support to science and scientists, and I know we have ministers here from the state support. Of course, there's a very important central government support, but I think we have to support our scientific institutions. So again, this is on the ratio of public expenditure on agriculture to agriculture share of GDP. As the economy grows and as industry and services sector expand, more R&D will take place there. So let us compare expenditure only relative to agricultural GDP, and it's shocking. Bangladesh spends more, 8% of its agricultural GDP on agricultural R&D. India spends 6%. And of course, China is spending 24%. So as I said, it's a totally different ballgame. So I think this is my second point, that support to science. I didn't look at the data for 60s and 70s, but I sort of ended it in 1980 because that was a turning point. The financial support was very important. Now I come to the policy support, which was already mentioned earlier, C. Subramaniam and the ministers and policy makers. But so here is one example about, these, which you mentioned, the 100 kg of seeds that arrived from Mexico. So I have a little story there that scientists from IARI, including my father, went to meet the minister to ask for import of seeds. And this was a time when our foreign exchange was not as healthy as today. And so there was a lot of discussion. The finance secretary, the finance minister, and all had to approve this. So there was one condition that Swaminathan put. He said, if you're giving me approval, do it quickly, because if the seeds come after October, they cannot be sown this season. The wheat season sowing will be over. So if you approve it and the wheat seeds arrive in December or January, it's of no use. Luckily, C. Subramaniam and others, it was approved. Now, what happened when the seeds came? Again, this is something you may know, but the seeds had to be multiplied. And so these demonstration plots were chosen, villages were chosen, and Jaunti village in Haryana is one of the villages. And I'm going to show you some photographs of Jaunti village. So this is inaugurating the Jaunti Village Seed Cooperative Society, Mrs. Gandhi. So this is going to inaugurate a village cooperative society. Please understand the importance of this. Not a big dam, not a Vande Bharat or a tunnel, but actually going to a village. And the next few photographs are at Jaunti. She's looking at the seed varieties that are being shown, men and women scientists. And this is on the stage, the farmers who are there, who are excited to grow these seeds. And the NCBS archive has letters, very interesting letters. I should have pulled out one, from farmers writing to IRI saying, can you send me so many kg of seeds? So that was the enthusiasm. And here is the event again at the Jaunti Seed Village. Okay. The next point I want to make is, it was not just agricultural science. Today, but even then, agriculture needs the knowledge, it's interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary from different sciences. Not just chemistry, physics, agronomy, but nuclear science, space science, today GIS mapping, I'm sure many of you are involved in that, satellite imagery, digital science, and so on. So here we have again very important event in the history which happened again under Mrs. Gandhi's rule, the opening of the nuclear research laboratory at the Pusa campus of IRI, because it was seen that mutation breeding and radiation techniques were going to be very important for the next round of varietal development. So the next few photographs are from the inauguration of the Nuclear Research Laboratory, NRL, and this is the NRL building. And then we have, this is Mrs. Gandhi on the dais, and extreme left is Vikram Sarabhai, who was chairman of the Indian Atomic Energy Agency, and he is speaking at this event. Okay, yeah, that is Vikram Sarabhai, and then we have now. Okay, so this is an article which M.S. Swaminathan had written in the Hindu. This was based on when he was given the Indira Gandhi Award for National Integration. And he writes about how Vikram Sarabhai and he went to meet Mrs. Gandhi to discuss the role of remote sensing to map coconut root wilt disease in Kerala. This was the detail of the scientific project that was being discussed. And you see, I have given, this is again from the archive. This is the project proposal. Study of root wilt disease using remote sensing techniques. IRI was the main, PI as it were, and the collaborating institutes were ISRO, Central Coconut Research Institute, and California. So it was an international study. It was a collaboration between ISRO and IRI, and the project proposal was being shown to and approved by Mrs. Gandhi. So this is the attention to detail. When you say support to science, to scientists, I think this is an example of what was happening then. Now, the last point, as it were, that I want to make is what has already been said a little bit about national sovereignty. You see, today we're a country with, as I said, 350 million tons plus of food grain. And that gives us a certain position globally. For most agricultural output, India is, if not the top, the second or third producer. China is one for many, US or Brazil maybe one for some crops. So at that time, when we had a food shortage, the question that Mrs. Gandhi asked was, how soon can we build a 10 million reserve? Today we have a 60 million ton reserve in order to be able to feed our farmers and farm laborers. So again, this is the food security. We have a reserve of 60 million tons, but as many of you know, we still have chronic hunger in India. That's a different issue. I'm not talking about that today. But I think this is the first step, was being able to adequate production, adequate stocks, and because she saw this as the foundation for independent foreign policy, for national sovereignty. And I want to give an example of this independent foreign policy. Again, you all know about the PR 480 grains, Public Law 480, which was the grain that was being imported, the wheat that was being imported by India from the United States. So in 1970s, as you know, the early 70s, the US was bombing Vietnam. And in 1975, when North Vietnam became independent, they asked India for help for food security, because all the bombs that had been thrown, the scorched earth policy of the US military, nothing could be grown. Agriculture was destroyed, apart from chemicals being strewn on the fields of Vietnam. Mrs. Indira Gandhi wanted to help Vietnam. And she called Swaminathan and others and said, how fast can we get grain to our ports in order to ship it to Vietnam? They thought about it, and I think, Swaminathan said that it'll take a long time because, from our godowns in Punjab, we have to take them to Vizag or somewhere else and ship them. So we have another idea. A shipment of PL 480 grain is in the high sea. It's already being sent to India. Why not divert that to Vietnam? And that was what was done. I mean, what a bold political move that the US shipment of grain was sent to Vietnam, which was being bombed by the US, and the Vietnamese never forgot that. And General Giap, who was later president, has many times told my father that how much he owes to India, how much he owed to Mrs. Indira Gandhi for saving Vietnam from widespread famine. So I want to make a point here. This is history, but we have to get lessons for today. And I'm going to mention one thing. India is now, it has a food reserve, is food surplus in terms of production, not in terms of ensuring hunger and food security for everybody. And we are now in a position to help other countries. In fact, as I said, we were importing 10 million tons of grain in 1966. Last few years, we've been exporting, I think, 28 to 30 million tons of rice. We are the largest rice exporter in the world. So in 2023, July 2023, if I remember, India put an export ban on non-basmati rice. So who was hurt by this ban? One of my students wrote an article about it. It was who was importing non-basmati rice from India? 99% of requirements of Nepal, 92% of requirements of Bangladesh, 78% of requirements of Senegal. So it is poorer countries in our region, in Africa, in elsewhere. And I think we have to show in our foreign policy now a commitment towards countries of the global south and how we have to play a role. So this knee-jerk export ban, for whatever reasons it was taken, did not benefit the farmers of India because by then there was no grain to be sold, and it actually hurt and harmed poor consumers in other parts of the global south. This is my last slide. Is this production boom that we had, the Green Revolution, the policies that were taken at that time, the setting up of institutions such as the Food Corporation of India, these form the basis for the food security that we have today, for the passing of the National Food Security Act in 2013. The fact that during COVID, I think the FCI annual report has a 1966 to 2026 has a big section on this, how much grain they moved during COVID, around 100 million tons for the PDS, for school meal programs, for distribution through other schemes. And I think this is very easy to dismantle. We're just reading about the privatization of silos, but to shift to cash transfers, to stop the systems of procurement, to cut back on the system of minimum support prices, etc. It's very easy to dismantle a system, very difficult to build all the institutions. So friends, let me end with, I think, two very important lessons, not to do with the varieties, etc., from this period of history. The period of the Green Revolution is the importance of science and scientific method. Please don't believe in whether it is zero budget farming or natural farming. These have to be tested. We have to be evidence-based, scientific method. That's what you have all learnt. And I think that's very, very important. We have to continue with science. We had discovered everything during the Vedas. We wouldn't have had the famines that were mentioned by Justice Reddy if we had already made all our scientific and technological achievements thousands of years ago. So please, I think as you pass out of this university, I think a commitment to science is what I would like all of you to go forth with. And as far as the rulers and the government and the policymakers are there, I think support to science, this has to be visible, in-person support, trusting scientists, financial support. And the last thing is very important. I think India, through the food sovereignty and national sovereignty, was able to be a support to many other third world countries during their struggles. And this we must not give up on other countries of the global south. Thank you very much.